Welcome to Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in the Inland Empire today, joined by Mike Hestrin. He is the district attorney for Riverside County. And I want to set up a fact pattern for you. I used to be a lawyer, so I'll set it up as a fact pattern.
Sure.
In 2015, Nebraska, deep red Nebraska, became the 19th state to abolish the death penalty. In 2016, California voters were asked to abolish the death penalty. Blue, deep dark blue, California, they voted 53% to keep the death penalty,
Yes.
not to abolish it.
Right.
Help me.
Well, you know.
What happened? And I'm not advocating, I'm just asking.
Right. Well, first of all, I mean, it is, each state has to make their own decisions. Many states that have abolished the death penalty over the last 10 years or so, you know, some of those states are actually now considering bringing it back. There's at least, I think, 2 states that have thought about bringing it back. It's been proposal to bring it back.
Okay.
So, you know, I think what happens in California is that California is a blue state as to presidential elections,
Right.
but when it comes to law and order, there's some.
But wait. The same election,
Yeah.
you had Prop 57 on the ballot,
Right.
which was to liberalize parole, okay?
Right.
Make it easier to get parole. It passes 64%.
Right.
Marijuana on the ballot,
Right.
legalize marijuana. It passes 57%. These are not law and order propositions. They're passing overwhelmingly.
So I think Proposition 47, which passed in 14,
Yeah.
and 57 are widely misunderstood by voters. I think that the labeling of those 2 initiatives, calling them rehabilitation, calling them prison reform, I think voters didn't get that what they were really accomplishing. Now, the marijuana, I think that's just
57%. I mean, that means 11% of the people who voted to yes to legalize marijuana voted no, and they wanted to keep the death penalty.
And that doesn't surprise me. I think the death penalty, when you're talking about people that murder and rape children and do horrible, horrible things, I think even people that are maybe in the middle or the little left of center, I think many of them support the death penalty.
I need to go on. In Riverside County, Hillary Clinton takes the county by a solid 5 points. Okay? It wasn't as if there was a none of the above. About 7% voted for someone else.
Right.
But she gets almost 50%. Donald Trump gets about 44%. The same county that voted almost 50% for Hillary Clinton
Right.
voted 64% to keep the death penalty.
Right.
This makes no sense.
It's not a partisan issue. I mean, I think so many times it gets played as a red against blue, and you know, all conservatives are for the death penalty, which is not true.
Right.
A lot of conservatives, you know, are not for the death penalty, but I think a lot of liberals do favor the death penalty. They favor, you know, as an option for the worst of the worst, and I think that's what you're seeing. I think that's what the numbers are showing.
Let's talk about Prop 66, because I think that's an important element. That was, I guess you could call it the alternative to Prop 62.
Yes.
Supported by folks like yourself, I believe.
I was a supporter.
Right. Barely passed, but it did.
Right.
Got 51%.
Yeah.
What did Prop 66 do?
Prop 66, the whole notion behind it was to get rid of some of the inefficiencies in our current system of the death penalty. So I'll give you a great example. Currently, under our current system, somebody goes through a trial, they get the death penalty, a jury comes back with a death verdict, a judge imposes it. They can expect to wait 7 years for a lawyer to be appointed to them for their appeal.
That's problematic.
And that is. And so Prop 66 said, let's cut out 7 or 8 years of delay, and it mandates that a lawyer be appointed right then and there at the trial court level. So that's just one example.
Who's going to accept the appointment?
Well, there's a whole, right now there's a...
Explain it for us.
Sure, right now
Explain it for
there's a pool of lawyers that take these cases, okay?
Are there enough?
Well, no, there aren't enough. So one of the things that Prop 66 also did was to expand the potential pool of lawyers that could do this work. You still have to qualify. You still have to have worked on certain level of cases. But expand the pool a little bit of eligible attorneys and make sure that everybody who has a death verdict rendered on them has an attorney.
As I understand, there's also some changes to procedures governing appeals, governing petitions, imposes some time limits on state death penalty review. Talk us through that. I know it gets a little inside baseball, but I do think it's important.
No, I can give you an overview. Okay. So in a broad sense, it imposes time limits on the filing of appeals on the death penalty. But keep in mind that these time limits are just presumptions and a judge can overrule them. So in other words, somebody is beyond the time limit, the judge can say, well, I find good cause. But what it does is it kind of makes a default. It kind of says to the judge, look, all things being equal, you need to move this case.
Will you help me on this? Again, I used to be a lawyer, haven't practiced in a long time, so little knowledge is a dangerous thing, but let me ask. Both when I was a lawyer and now that I'm not, what I notice people say in terms of their frustration is the repeated appeals. They don't begrudge the defendant an appeal, but why is it that with the death penalty we see repeated appeals?
That's a great question.
Can Prop 66 address that?
It does. So
Okay.
when people say that they're opposed to the repeated appeals, really what they're talking about is a process of habeas corpus.
Right.
So the habeas process follows the appeals
And
process.
that's a federal.
It's a federal
Right.
process. So you go through the whole state process, then you begin your federal appeals process, which is called habeas. One of the things that habeas does right now is that in California, we have the state habeas process. We also have a state habeas process.
Okay.
That is handled by the Supreme Court. So what Prop 66 said is let's let that be handled by the trial judge as well.
So it's consolidated
Yes.
for those purposes?
Right.
And is there no way to consolidate, I mean, I know the answer, but the state appeal and the federal appeal?
No, there's no way to consolidate that. But what we're doing essentially is putting the state habeas process in the trial court that has the most knowledge of the case. Because remember, a habeas is not an appeal, it's an issue of fact. So
Right.
who knows the most about the facts? The judge that tried the case.
At the same time, even with Prop 66, although we don't know for sure,
Right.
but one is more likely in California to die on death row than to be put to death.
Sure.
Do you expect that to change under 66?
Well, I don't know if I'll go that far to say that we're going to have a lot of executions fast, but I will say I think we're going to start having executions again in the next year or two.
But the challenge behind that is completely aside from 66. Correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have an execution regime in place.
We don't have a current protocol in
Right,
place.
because we were looking to use drugs.
Right.
And we have not had a cocktail approved, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Talk me through it.
Well, there's an approval process, and Proposition 66 also deals with that. It takes the current system, or the pre-66
Right.
system, had a very cumbersome and bureaucratic approval process where any kind of a change to the protocol required a very lengthy time where the public could weigh in and ask questions, and all those questions had to be answered. Well, opponents of the death penalty would simply flood the committee with thousands and thousands of questions.
But we also know drug makers are not wanting to provide their medications for
Sure.
death purposes. So where do we go with that?
Well, I mean, we can, there are certainly drugs out there. You know, the state approved euthanasia, right? I mean, so there are drugs out there that...
Oh, right, in terms of animals. Is that what you mean with euthanasia? When you say euthanasia, meaning what?
No, the assisted suicide.
Assisted suicide.
Yeah, sorry,
Thank you. Assisted
Yeah,
suicide.
assisted suicide. So
Right, so there are drugs out there, right?
there are drugs out there, right?
Right.
So, I mean, certainly there are drugs out there that are approved for those purposes. So we'll get it figured out.
It's fascinating. It just is fascinating. California it never ceases to stump me what California voters do, but apparently they want to get it right, and maybe they do.
Yeah.
His name is Mike Hestrin. He is the district attorney for Riverside County. My name is Brad Pomerance. We're coming to you from the Inland Empire. We thank you for joining us on Local Edition.